Hello, I'm Esther Githu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Horror and grief in the United States as a 14-year-old boy in the state of Georgia kills 2 fellow high school students, 2 teachers, and wounds 9 others. Ugandan Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei is dead days after she was doused with petrol and set on fire. And Botswana faces an uphill battle in combating substance abuse among its youth. We'll have a report. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin in the U.S. state of Georgia, where a 14-year-old boy has killed 2 fellow students, 2 teachers, and wounded 9 others in a shooting at a high school in east of Atlanta. It's the first mass campus shooting since the start of the school year. VOA's Philip Alexio has more.
More details emerging on the 14-year-old suspect in a deadly shooting at a Georgia high school Wednesday who killed 4 people and wounded 9 others at Appalachia High School in the city of Winder, northeast of Atlanta. The suspect was taken into custody and has been identified as Colt Gray. Investigators say he was interviewed by law enforcement last year over online threats about committing a school shooting. Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Chris Hosey, said Gray will be charged and tried as an adult. Hosey identified those killed in the attack at a press conference Wednesday night.
Mason Schermerhorn, age 14, who is a student here at the school. Christian Angelo, who was 14, also a student here at the school. Richard Aspinwall, not sure of his age, but he was a teacher here at the school. And Christina Irmery, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, who was also a teacher here at the school.
This was the first mass shooting in the United States since the start of the school year, only a few weeks since it began in many school districts. It's rattled the community of 18,000, which gathered earlier on Wednesday for a prayer vigil.
Today, an angel has stepped in. So now let us be good.
The FBI said local law enforcement had interviewed a 13-year-old subject and his father last year regarding online threats to commit a school shooting. Investigators said, quote, the father stated he had hunting guns in the house, but the subject did not have unsupervised access to them. The subject denied making the threats online. Jackson County alerted local schools for continued monitoring of the subject. Georgia officials confirmed a statement was in connection to the subject in custody. County Sheriff Judge Smith said the gunman on Wednesday was armed with an AR platform-style weapon or semi-automatic rifle. Smith said the suspect was quickly confronted by deputies assigned to the school and immediately got on the ground and surrendered. Once under arrest, the suspect was speaking with investigators who believe he was acting alone. Authorities declined to say if they knew what motivated him. Smith also told reporters that all 9 of those hospitalized were expected to recover. Philip Alexio, VOA News.
The heartbroken mother of Ugandan Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei, who tragically died on Thursday from her wounds after she was set on fire by a man her father calls a former boyfriend, says her daughter was, quote, good and polite child. Kenya and Uganda media reported that Cheptegei, 33, who competed in the Paris Olympics, suffered burns to more than 75% of her body in Sunday's attack, making her the 3rd sportswoman to be killed in Kenya since October 2021. The official announcement of her death came at the hospital.
Today it is my sad duty to inform you of the passing of Rebecca Cheptegei, who was admitted in our unit following severe burns that she sustained. So during the course of her stay here, we've done all that we could for her. She had a severe percentage of burns, which unfortunately led to multi-organ failure.
Peter Ogwang, Uganda's Minister of State for Sport, says Kenyan authorities are investigating the killing. Nearly 34% of Kenyan girls and women aged 15 to 49 years have suffered physical violence, according to government data from 2022, with married women at particular risk. Neither U.S. presidential candidate has laid out exactly how they plan to deal with Russia's war against Ukraine. The battlefield in Ukraine is radically changing, giving more power to the country in determining its own fate. VOA White House correspondent Anita Paul has the details.
Ukraine's ancient capital knows well what it's like to be tossed about by the waves and whims of powerful forces. And so analysts there seem ambivalent to a possible second term for former President Donald Trump.
There is a prevailing opinion that the return of Trump to the White House is not the best scenario for Ukraine, although there are also cautious opinions that everything may not be that bad.
Trump has said he will swiftly end the war, though his running mate, J.D. Vance, once said he doesn't really care about Ukraine, leaving Ukrainians unsure what to think. This makes a potential Kamala Harris presidency more of a wild card to this nation that knows Trump and President Joe Biden so well. Harris has met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and represented Biden at major transatlantic security summits. But on the trail, Harris has only briefly spotlighted Ukraine and how she differs from Trump.
He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. As president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
Analysts say Harris is likely to follow Biden's support Ukraine playbook, and Trump's broad foreign policy pronouncements remain as vague as ever. Take Trump's promise that he will end the war in one day.
It's not entirely clear how he'll do that. The fear, of course, is that he'll do it by simply abandoning Ukraine, cutting off funds and pressuring Zelensky into negotiations at a time when Putin would enjoy all of the bargaining leverage.
But he says the battlefield has shifted with Ukrainian forces' recent decision to strike across the border and take a bite of Russian territory. While analysts widely predict that Ukraine will neither seek nor succeed in holding this land, it's a bargaining chip that will help Kyiv whoever wins. And he said Biden could also put his hand on the scale at a pivotal stage.
I wouldn't be expecting any shift in the US position vis-a-vis Ukraine's military operations before November, but I would be watching between November and January, whatever the outcome, to see if there is a little bit more leash given to Kyiv.
And he notes Ukraine's leader has bolstered his relationships with European leaders and broadened his support. And so, as these two race to the end of this story, what could end up happening in Ukraine ultimately may not be up to the American president, whoever she or he is. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
President Xi Jinping is pledging to step up China's support across debt-laden Africa with funding of nearly $51 billion over 3 years for more infrastructure projects and the creation of at least 1 million jobs. Xi told African delegates from more than 50 nations gathered in Beijing for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation that China is ready to increase cooperation with Africa in industry, agriculture, infrastructure, trade, and investment. Several African leaders spoke during Thursday's session.
Your Excellency, I'm honored and privileged to meet with you once again. I still vividly remember the candid discussion we had on matters of mutual interest. Indeed, this summit has continued to play a vital role in shaping China's Africa relations.
China-Nigerian relations that is of our century should further strengthen our trade and economic development program. We believe that you have reformed the Chinese economy And our program, too, is on that course.
Africa needs to come of age and learning the lessons of China. We also understand the importance of China in maintaining or assuring global peace, stability, and security to minimize conflicts in the world.
Analysts say Beijing's strict market access rules are blocking African food exporters from selling into the giant consumer market. For more insight on the China-Africa Cooperation Summit, I'm joined live from here in Washington by Paul Nantulia, a China specialist and analyst at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Paul, what more can Africa gain from this summit?
Thank you very much for inviting me on the show, and I'm actually on my way to Beijing, so it will be an interesting time to be on the ground. Well, African countries, if they develop proper strategic focus, can actually draw significant benefits from the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. The first obvious area is in human resource development. China has shown a willingness that it is, that it is able and capable of developing, human resource capacity and capability on the African continent through scholarships, through fellowships, and other forms of assistance. So I think that is the one obvious area. The other obvious area is in green growth. Looking at the outcome documents that have come out so far, the Chinese side has made a commitment to work with African countries to help their transition from hydroelectric power to renewable energy. So I think that's the other obvious area. The third obvious area, which I think the Chinese side and the African side have been able to find one another halfway, is in the area of market access. Now, there's still a lot of, as you mentioned, quite rightly, there's still quite a number of non-tariff barriers into different Chinese markets, not just the national market, but even smaller markets like Beijing and Yiwu, which can make a big difference to an African economy. And I've seen language to that effect in the outcome document, that the two sides are going to focus a little bit more to try and remove those impediments. But I think the African side has a lot of homework to do in terms of making the structural adjustments to move those economies and to add value so that African countries can stop exporting and relying on commodities, but rather export manufactured goods. That's the only way to close the large deficit between African countries and China.
Paul, you talk about, Africans doing something together, but one of the questions I've had over and over since there was the US-Africa summit was that they did not come to the US with a common agenda. So do they have a common agenda? Should they have one as they continue this summit in Beijing as to what they want to take back to the continent?
Look, I wrote a report around that, which was circulated to some African delegates ahead of this FOCAC. And even ahead of the previous FOCAC, this is one area that I have been quite insistent on, that African countries still do not have a coherent strategy towards China. The African Union does not have a common strategic policy framework, leave alone towards China, but even the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. Many African analysts on the continent find this unacceptable because FOCAC is 24 years old. And in 24 years, China has been able to release 3 or 4 strategic documents towards Africa, towards the African continent. China knows exactly what it wants to get out of the African continent. One would be hard-pressed to really say with certainty what the African side would like to get out of China and out of the FOCAC mechanism. So I think this is why I say that African countries need to do their homework. Very few African countries, if any, have offices of China coordination, for instance, right? So I think one of the things that is lacking, that is making it extremely difficult for African countries to exert the kind of agency they need to be able to exert, is the lack of a strategic policy framework towards the People's Republic of China. And this really has to change.
Paul, well said. We'll look at some assessment once the leaders return to the continent as to what happened there. Paul Nantulia is a China specialist and analyst at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Efforts are ongoing to find ways to prevent road accidents in Nigeria. Accidents kill more Nigerians than lack of security in the country. Experts blame Nigeria's Federal Road Safety Commission's failure to enforce traffic rules. Al-Hassan Bala reports from Abuja, Nigeria.
Maneuvering big and small potholes has become normal for those driving on Kaduna-Abuja highway. Whether driving large trucks or other smaller vehicles, all drivers face the risks of a head collision every single day. According to the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS), in 2023 alone, 5,081 people were killed and 31,873 people suffered various forms of injuries in road accidents throughout the country. According to NBS records, the highest number of accidents happened on the Kaduna-Abuja highway, resulting in 490 deaths.
The current frustrating roads and the fact that it is one way major issues contributing to road accidents. I had an accident 2 days after my other car had an accident on the same Kaduna-Abuja highway where 10 people died. Dan bayan ma na yi da kwana biyu ma yar wancan motar ma haka ta yi sai da mutum 10 suka mutu a gurin.
Basiri Husseini survived one such accident with fractures in both his legs and is currently receiving treatment at a local orthopedic hospital in Kaduna.
I was driving when my striding full up. I lost control of the car. The car moved to the other lane, in which we had a head collision with a 12-seater bus. That was how I fractured my legs.
According to the World Health Organization, WHO, 1.19 million people lose their lives globally in road accidents, with about 50 million suffering non-fatal injuries annually.
Example, you look at a Golf that used to carry only 4 passengers. The boot, they will put 3, 4, 5, some 6. Only in the boot. Then the middle, inside of 3, they will put 4. The driver side is supposed to put only 1 person. They will put 2, plus the driver 3. And again, overspeeding. Some of them, their speed limit is to 140, 150. With such up load.
Salisu Medori is the owner of a local orthopedic hospital. He says most of the patients he treats in hospital or at home are victims of road accidents.
Most times, kaga za mu dora kaman mutum sai mu dora kaman akwai ranar da ranar duniya ma akwai ranar da za ta kai mun dora yau gobe mu da za mu dora kaman mutum from road accidents. Wani kuma za mu dora wata rana mu dora 4, wata rana mu dora 5, wata rana mu dora 10, wata rana mu yada.
According to Dr. Muhammad Musa Metakobi, president of the Road Transport Workers Association of Nigeria, corruption is a huge issue in Nigeria, and most drivers get away with only fines, resulting in continuation of violations.
The security agencies are collecting bribes. It's not all. There are some used to. There are some ones reject, and they do the right things.
Nigerian police spokesperson Olumuyiwa Adejobi said in a statement that avoidable accidents kill more innocent Nigerians than lack of security in the country. He blamed reckless driving for causing most accidents. Nigeria's Federal Road Safety Commission (FRSC) has been criticized for their inability to enforce traffic rules in the country and their efforts to force vehicle owners to put speed limit devices on their vehicles have been unsuccessful. VOA contacted the office of FRSC spokesperson Jonas Agu for his reaction but received no response.
Nigeria alone has over 11 million registered vehicles, amounting to 75% registered vehicles in the entire West Africa. With the number of Nigerians behind the wheel constantly on the rise, there is a dire need to put in place and enforce comprehensive traffic laws to prevent further road accidents across the country. Al-Hassan Bala, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Still to come, Botswana faces an uphill battle combating substance abuse among its youth. We'll be right back.
Elder care can come as a job that one did not apply for, anticipate, or even desire to do. However, whether a responsibility or an obligation, it is a task that must be done by a family member or a professional to assist the elderly. Today we examine the challenges as well as resources available to best care for the elderly in our family or community. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, Congo is receiving its first delivery of almost 100,000 doses of the Mpox vaccine on Thursday. The DRC is at the epicenter of the Mpox outbreak, with cases and deaths rising. The World Health Organization says more than 17,000 cases and over 600 deaths have been reported in the country since the start of the year. More than 70 Zimbabwean activists are free on Thursday following their acquittal Wednesday after being arrested and charged in June for disorderly conduct for allegedly planning to peacefully demonstrate during a meeting of the Southern African Development Community. An Algerian Olympic gold medal boxing champion, Imane Khalif, is inspiring a newfound interest in the sport, particularly among women. The 25-year-old welterweight success in Paris has vaulted her to national hero status, especially after Algerians rallied behind her in the face of uninformed speculation about her gender and eligibility to compete. Botswana is facing an uphill battle in combating substance abuse, especially among its younger population. Many fall victims to drugs because the country is a transit route for drug trafficking in the region. Kondisi Dube reports from Gaborone.
When he was a student, Tumelo Singawane's future looked bright. He dreamed of becoming the country's president, a lawyer or a doctor. He was academically gifted.
I was an outgoing student, and I loved the whole life, you know. The problem is when you are outgoing, you always fall into many traps, you know. That's how it happens. I even represented Botswana for some time in karate when I was growing up, which I felt like I did something for my country. Just that along the way I met the drugs and all of that.
The 36-year-old's world came crumbling down when he found himself caught in the dark world of drugs, which at some point landed him in jail. Singawane was imprisoned for 2 years from 2015 to 2016 for inflicting serious bodily injuries on someone. He blames those actions on his drug and alcohol addiction at the time.
It was a very bad thing that I still regret up until this day. You know, sometimes we do things not knowing that it's going to affect your life that much, you know. I'm looking at the fact that that person I could have avoided, but because of that ego and that, I don't know, that confidence from the cat, the alcohol, maybe I wouldn't have done anything. I would have just walked away if I was on a sober state.
Since then, Singawani has managed to overcome his addiction. He now heads a non-profit organization called Drugs Free is the New Cool movement. Through the organization, he has reached out to mostly young people to help them avoid falling into what could be a bottomless, life-destroying pit.
I had a problem of addiction from alcohol and other substances like cat and cocaine and also your codeine. So I felt that I needed to speak out so that I save somebody from the pain that I went through. So I thought, you know what, let me get other young Botswana and let's try do this. So we registered Drug Free is the New Cool organization.
Botswana is a major transit route for goods into Southern Africa, which the country's defense minister Kahiso Musi says exposes it to drug trafficking. Kutlwano Kipaletse, a substance abuse counselor at the Botswana Substance Abuse Support Network, BOSASNET, says while drug abuse is on the rise, many addicts do not seek help, fearing the social stigma that afflicts drug abusers.
The inquiries show that there's a large number of people out there that are crying for help, for this help. We see a lot more people, a lot less numbers of people reaching here and being enrolled for the service. So we are aware that actually people are not coming for services. But I think also that is mainly around the stigma surrounding mental health and the substance use disorder.
Kipaletse says the organization also provides programs that can help prevent substance abuse.
We go to schools because we do realize that a lot of onset or introduction to drugs happens in schools because it's the place where a lot of children spend their time at, right, outside the home. So we go to schools, we have these talks with students, and we try engage them in group counseling.
In February, Botswana's Minister of Finance, Peggy Serame, announced she will give significant funding to the newly established drug enforcement agency in the country. According to a recent report by non-profit Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Southern Africa has become a significant drug transit hub and a destination market for a variety of illicit drugs. Mqondisi Dube, VOA News, Gaborone, Botswana.
Thanks, Mqondisi. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.